congregation for a year and a half. Welcome to you, old friends and new, young and old, in this room and online. Whether today is your first or your 1000th Sunday with us, you are an essential part of our service today. The Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Northfield is an inclusive community that nurtures spiritual and intellectual growth and fosters ethical and social responsibility. We are mindful that we gather today with different needs. Whatever brings you here, you are invited to take what feeds you. Just as you are welcome here. If you are a visitor, either in person or online, we are glad you are with us, and we invite you to stay after the service to get acquainted. We welcome your questions and look forward to getting to know you. We have a few announcements before we begin our service. They are also printed in your order of service. Spring cleaning for Mother Earth. The Green Team is working with Wherever Recycling to meet the goal of reducing the carbon footprint of our community. Please donate clothing, shoes, belts, jackets, scarves, blankets, sheets, towels, or rags to be repurposed in a responsible manner. A collection box is located in the UUFN parking lot. It will be here for the next 3 Sundays. Let's make this a successful community effort. After the April 23rd Sunday service, Will Wiedenhoft of Misfit Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Northfield will lead a short 15-minute Jiu-Jitsu mini workshop designed for every body. You are not too short, too fat, too small, too tall, too inflexible, or too old. Really. Come and experience a low-stress, highly joyful way to experiment with our monthly theme of resistance. Next Sunday, April 16, join us for a multi-generational participatory worship service celebrating the earth, led by Reverend Diana McLean, our UUFN Director of Family Ministries, and Worship Associate Janet Scannell. Plan on staying after the service next Sunday for a congregational meeting to review the preliminary budget for the 2023 to 24 church year. Again, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Northfield.
Good morning and happy spring. I am the Reverend Smalley, she, her pronouns, the minister of UUFN, and it is a joy to be together this morning. Our opening words are by Reverend Gretchen Haley. Roll away the stone of your hesitant heart. Let the light shine on all the sleeping shadows. Awaken to this day that offers itself to you and to all as a gift. Awaken to this beauty that persists, this chance that we might begin again, that even here we are finding our way to healing, to hope, that even now we are changed by the in and out of breath, the recreation of community, the remembering of how to grieve together, woven through loving, that we might still surprise this earth with a new song sung together, calling us all in, and before long, sending us back out to life. Come, let us worship together.
The flaming chalice is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. Each Sunday when we gather, we bring this symbol to life together. Please join me in speaking the words for the lighting of the chalice. Let us open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Let us open our minds to learn what is true. Let us open our hearts to love one another. Please rise in body or spirit for our opening hymn, number 270, in the gray hymnal, O Day of Light and Gladness.
This past week marked the start of Passover in the Jewish calendar. Passover is a festival of liberation, telling the story of the Jewish people's exodus out of Egypt into freedom. This past week was also Holy Week in the Christian calendar. Today is Easter, the day Christians celebrate the resurrection of Christ, and I'm going to be preaching about that. One of the sources of Unitarian Universalism is Christian teachings, which call us to love our neighbors as ourselves. And I think Easter is a good day to honor the Christian heritage in our faith traditions. Unitarian Universalists don't believe the Bible is the primary source of religious inspiration, but it is one of our sources. If you are feeling resistance about hearing about resurrection today, because you come to a UU church so you don't have to hear about the Bible, or whatever the reason, luckily, our monthly theme is the path of resistance. You are already engaging in the spiritual practice of noticing your discomfort and what it might have to teach you. I also know that there are those present in this room who want to hear about Jesus and who are longing to hear the good news of Easter. There is room for us all. Holy Week doesn't start with Easter, though. Let's tell the full story. Here's a timeline of Holy Week with thanks to PBS's The Roman Empire in the First Century for some of the language. Holy Week started last week with Palm Sunday, the commemoration of Christ's triumphal entry into Jerusalem. People lined the streets to greet Jesus, having heard of his message that there was a kingdom greater than Rome, and that the poorest members of society would find relief and hope. His ideas were revolutionary and threatened to undermine 2,000 years of social tradition. He preached that it was the very will of God that the powerful would be brought down and the most marginalized would be liberated, and all oppression shall cease. Jesus and many of the people who lined the streets were there for the Jewish ceremony of Passover. There were thousands of pilgrims from around the world, and the temple provided services for them to change their foreign money or buy animals to sacrifice. This made Jesus furious. He believed that trade like this corrupted the holy site, moneylenders trying to profit off of faith. According to the Gospel of St. John, Jesus wrecked the stalls of the moneylenders and drove them all out of the temple. This outburst enraged religious leaders and threatened to destroy the fragile peace imposed by Rome. Tensions escalated. On Maundy, Thursday of Holy Week, we commemorate Jesus' gathering with his companions to break bread together at the Last Supper. In this time of great fear and upheaval, they gathered around the table to share a meal, and Jesus said, "This is my body, which will be given for you." The next day, Good Friday, Jesus was arrested on a charge of treason and brutally crucified. Jesus was killed because he was resisting empire. Imagine the hope and elation of Palm Sunday, hearing a prophet speaking truth to power and believing that new way was possible. And then imagine the despair when that prophet was killed. That's the truth of Holy Saturday. The day the only thing Jesus' followers knew was terror and grief. Their world had been ripped apart. We're coming in today on Easter Sunday towards the end of the story. Because as Reverend Rachel Hayes says, Easter does not arrive in a perfect shining moment. Easter comes into a time of sadness, grief, confusion, fear, and defeat. Jesus' disciples saw him and all of their hopes arrested, tortured, and killed, sealed into a tomb. We can only understand Easter if we understand that despair, which I think we can. We understand the excitement of Palm Sunday as a gathered crowd dreamed a new world was possible. We can understand the tenderness of Holy Thursday anytime we share a meal and share our fears and know that time as sacred. We know the devastation of Good Friday, the death of someone we love, the death of hope, the death of a future we longed for. And we know what it's like to sit in the liminal space of the tomb on Holy Saturday, the day between the shattering and the what's next that sometimes stretches out for months or years. And if we know those things, I think we also know a thing or two about resurrection on this Easter Sunday. Easter is a story that makes the claim year after year that death does not have the final word, that love outlives oppression and justice will prevail. So we're not setting aside our reason today to believe in an impossible story, but let's not set aside our hearts either, that we might wonder about this thing called resurrection together.
We will now take our offertory. Our offertory is one way we make our care for the world tangible. Our Share of the Plate donations this month go to Citizens Climate Lobby, a nonprofit, nonpartisan, grassroots advocacy climate change organization focused on national policies to address climate change. Their consistently respectful, nonpartisan approach to climate education is designed to create a broad, sustainable foundation for climate action across all geographic regions and political inclinations. In this month of Earth Day, let us give joyfully and generously as we are able. You may donate by cash, check made out to UUFN with offering basket in the memo line, or online from our website. You can scroll down to the bottom of the homepage for the link. We now gratefully accept the offering.
As we move into our time of joys and sorrows, I invite you to allow yourself into a relaxed and unhurried breath. Unclench your jaw, soften your gaze, relax your shoulders, and find ease in this moment. Rest in the embrace of a wider love. In the presence of this love, we use our chalice flame to light our candles of community. We light our first candle as a blessing for the wider world. In the wake of a Texas judge issuing an order that could suspend approval of a drug used in medication abortions by pregnant people across the country, we light this candle as an affirmation that our Unitarian Universalist faith holds central the inherent worth and dignity of all people. This includes a belief in the sacredness of all bodies and the importance of self-determination and human agency. We affirm now our commitment to building a world in which all people are able to make choices about their bodies, their health, and their families within safe, thriving communities. We know too that the details of our daily lives are sacred and important, and we light a candle for all of the simple joys that are sustaining us. And we light another candle in honor of the sorrows and hardships we might be carrying today. A candle in honor of the joys and sorrows we carry in our hearts, but that have not been spoken out loud. And we move into a time of silence. May the truth of your heart be reflected in these flames. Spirit of life and love, God of many names and no names, force of love in this world, hear our prayer this Easter morning as we roll back the stone covering the most tender places of our hearts, holding the pain of the world, of our own lives, the disappointment pushing down upon us with trembling hands and weary spirits. May we feel the light of love pour forth and know we are not alone. May we feel the call to reach in and bring that love out into the world in full force, even if we are not sure what that looks like, even if we are afraid, even if the world feels like it is breaking, the chasm widening, even if. May we feel the hope and the possibility of new life, creation remade again and again with our help, with our hands and feet and eyes and ears, with our prayers and fellowship and justice making, with hugs and laughter, beauty and joy and tears, all of it tangled up together. May we be the light of the world. May love prevail in the name of all that is holy. Amen. May it be so.
Our first reading is The Humanist Speaks of Easter by Kendall Gibbons. There are only two things that we know for sure. One, they stashed Jesus's body in a tomb. temporarily until they could get a chance to bury it properly. And when they came back, the tomb was empty. Make of that what you will. There are many possible explanations, some more likely than others. I don't believe that Jesus came back from the dead. Neither did Martin or Malcolm. Neither did Viola Liozzo or Frassan Asafi, the women's rights activist shot by the Taliban in Afghanistan last November. Neither will dismembered journalist Jaman Khashoggi or Alexei Navalny when he dies in a Russian prison. Neither will documentary filmmaker Brent Renaud or photographer Maxim Levin, both killed by invading armies in Ukraine. Kevin Strickland and Lamont McIntyre will not get back the stolen decades of their lives. I don't believe that the crucifixion is a story with a happy ending or that it was a one-time event. It happens over and over as the human journey unfolds. It happens to us and to the people we love. It happens to the righteous and the innocent. Crucifixion happens and it feels like the end of the world every time. It feels like nothing could matter anymore ever. And then inevitably and miraculously, something happens next. Something happens, of course it does. Because the world hasn't ended yet. It's not always an empty tomb. How trite would that become? Mostly the beloved bodies just lie right there peacefully decomposing. But something happens, and whether we want it to or not, a new chapter begins. Maybe the sun comes up or the lilies do. Spring rolls around, that happens. Or memories come or someone needs you. You eat food, that happens. You walk down the road and share a recollection. Life happens, keeps happening. The dead don't rise, but we do. One day it happens, you take a breath and it doesn't hurt to breathe. You start to see people again, really see them. Hope rises, community rises, you rise, we rise, life rises. Not because death isn't real. Crucifixion is not just pretend. But something else is just as real, maybe even more real. Something happens next. That is the other thing we know for sure. Life rises, outrage rises, love rises, faith rises, tears rise, hope rises. This I do believe. And this, an excerpt from Wendell Berry's manifesto, The Mad Farmer Liberation Front. Every day, do something that won't compute. Love the Lord, love the world, work for nothing. Take all that you have and be poor. Ask the questions that have no answers. Invest in the millennium. Plant sequoias. Say that your main crop is the forest that you did not plant, that you will not live to harvest. Put your faith in the 2 inches of humus that build under the trees every 1,000 years. Expect the end of the world. Laugh. Laughter is immeasurable. Be joyful, though you have considered all the facts. Be like the fox who makes more tracks than necessary, some in the wrong direction. Practice resurrection.
Thank you. As Unitarian Universalists, we do okay with Christmas, Jesus was born. We understand Good Friday, Jesus died. But what do we do with Easter, with a literally unbelievable story about resurrection? I am not here, as I said, to convince you about anything, just to tell you that I personally believe in resurrection. I've seen it, I've felt it, I feel it now, the truth of the energy rising on this Easter morning as we welcome spring. But it's complicated. In the podcast, A People's Theology, in an episode entitled, Did Jesus Really Resurrect?, host Mason Menenga talks with John Dominic Crossan. Crossan is a former Catholic priest and one of the most prominent and influential New Testament scholars and historians of early Christianity. There are, of course, many interpretations of resurrection among scholars, but when asked about what the concept of resurrection meant 2,000 years ago, in his strong Irish accent, Crossan answers, "It's a weird word, resurrection. In Greek, it's anastasis. What's weird about it? Nobody else in the time of Jesus used the word except Pharisee Judaism. Nobody else used it." Menenga asks, so what you're saying is that this understanding that Jesus's body was literally or bodily resurrected is sort of a foreign concept to what a lot of those early followers of Jesus would have understood about resurrection. They would have understood resurrection very differently. Crossan says yes. The answer to, did Jesus really resurrect, according to this highly respected scholar and historian, is no. Quote, "I do not think that anyone, anywhere, at any time brings dead people back to life." These early followers of Jesus would have thought of resurrection as a communal metaphor, not an individual miracle, with deep reverence for the Bible. Crossan states, "These ancient texts, if I take them literally, they're kind of ridiculous, but I don't know how, but they were glimpsing something. I'm talking about people 2,000 years ago who glimpsed something through a glass darkly. But I think what they glimpsed, we have to take very, very seriously." What they glimpsed was the world of metaphor. Crossan claims, and I agree, that metaphorical resurrection is actually more powerful than literal resurrection. In the words of Crossan, metaphor creates reality. If the metaphor gets big enough, we're living inside of it. Our metaphors create our reality. We live inside of our metaphors. For example, if humanity is placed above animals but below angels on the hierarchy of creation, if Earth is sandwiched between heaven and hell and matters less than either, we will experience the world differently than if we celebrate the sacred cycle of life and live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. If the cultural metaphor of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps prevails, our society will look different than if we imagine the world as an interdependent web of all connection of which we are a part, an interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. These metaphors are big enough that they impact everything from how we experience ourselves as individuals to global climate change and how we respond to it. The phoenix rises. The stone is rolled away. These are metaphors our spirits long to live in. If the resurrection were a literal fact, it was a miracle that happened once. If it's a metaphor, it's a miracle that happens over and over again. As Crossan states, the resurrection is not an end-time product, but an in-time process. Holy Week plays out over and over again. It happens when we have faith in the possibility of Palm Sunday, even though it was taken away from us once. It happens when we side with the oppressed instead of the empire, believing still that even though empire won on Good Friday, it doesn't win in the end. Resurrection happens on a personal level too, when we roll the stone of apathy or addiction away and believe a new life is possible. It happens, I think, even if the stone is sort of halfway rolled away, and a person with addiction knows they are worthy of sunlight, even if they don't fully rise. Easter is about our aliveness. Grief shows our aliveness. Joy shows our aliveness. Purpose, heartbreak, awe. These are all ways we become fully alive, fully and divinely human. We practice resurrection. To do so, maybe we plant sequoias, Earth's most massive trees, born from a very tiny seed. It takes 91,000 of them to add up to a single pound. Giant sequoias can't sprout from roots or stumps like the coast redwoods can, which means every single one of them started with one of these tiny seeds, growing to over 26 stories tall. Giant sequoias can live for over 3,000 years, and they never stop growing until the day they die. We can live in the metaphor of planting sequoias. Says Brother Thomas of the Society of St. Francis. To plant a sequoia is to acknowledge the fact that you will never see it grow to its full height. You will never see the effects that planting that one tree has on the ecosystem. To plant that tree is to believe in the future of generations that will come after you. To plant a sequoia is choosing life and paving the way for others to do the same. Practicing resurrection is never just about me. The poet says, "Say that your main crop is the forest that you did not plant, that you will not live to harvest. Put your faith in the 2 inches of humus that will build under the trees every 1,000 years. Expect the end of the world." Expect the end of the world. The Easter story tells us it's already happened. The world, as Jesus' followers knew it, ended. Full stop. Grief and hardship are a part of the process. And then a miracle occurred, and a new world felt possible again. And so after the end of the world comes, laugh. Every day, do something that won't compute. Practice resurrection every day, not just Easter Sunday. What small movements can you take to sow beauty, to amplify joy, to radiate love outwards to others and inwards to your own tender heart? How can you carry your grief and your gratitude in equal measure out into your life? Again, the words of Brother Thomas, who has a very large tattoo across his forearm that reads, "Practice resurrection," so you know he takes this idea seriously. Sometimes resurrection looks like having the courage to get out of bed. Sometimes it is answering the phone and talking to the person you'd rather not talk to. Perhaps it is stretching your legs and going for a walk, or picking up that paintbrush that has been sitting there waiting for you to come back to it. Maybe resurrection is letting go and accepting the fact that we can't control things or fix them. Maybe resurrection is a nap, or a smile, or a dozen cookies left on the doorstep of a neighbor's house. Practicing resurrection is the act of reaching towards anything that will give you life. And in a world that is being smothered by death and hopelessness, that reaching towards life is revolutionary. It is defiant. I get to be a participant in resurrection. And if I am participating, then that means a piece of humanity is participating. And if through me humanity is participating, then that means that a little piece of the world is being made whole. Practice resurrection, it whispers. Not just for you, but for a world that desperately needs it. Consider this from Reverend G. Travis Norville, a progressive Baptist preacher in Minneapolis, written after George Floyd was murdered by a police officer, killed by agents of the state. Nearly once a week, I pedal or walk 2 miles north from my house to 38th Street and Chicago Avenue, the site of George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis, Minnesota. The weekly pilgrimage is my personal practice for keeping my heart tender and large. Each visit reminds me of the pain of my city. Each visit inspires me for the possibility of my city. Each visit moves me from the rhetoric of resurrection to the practice of resurrection. Until my weekly trips to George Floyd Square, I had no idea what the phrase "practice resurrection" meant. I was only in love with its sound. Every time I attempted to apply this imperative to the situation in Minneapolis, I came up empty. I cannot resurrect George Floyd. I cannot proclaim life when there is so much communal pain at George Floyd Square. As I listened to a recording by the late Dr. Krister Stendahl, former dean of Harvard Divinity School, however, a way forward emerged. Dr. Stendahl asked the crowd a simple question: can you heal like Jesus? The crowd was silent. Dr. Stendahl broke the silence with his admission, "Neither can I." Then if we cannot heal like Jesus, why do we not do everything possible to create national health care in this nation? His logic was sound and simple. If you cannot literally heal like Jesus, then you do everything you possibly can to try and imitate Jesus's healing ministry on a national scale. Could this apply to practicing resurrection? I believe it can. I cannot resurrect George Floyd, but we can do everything we can to create a community where BIPOC neighbors have lungs full of breath and where they live long, happy, fulfilling lives. I realize that to practice resurrection is much more than police reform. The conviction of former officer Derek Chauvin on all charges for the murder of George Floyd was but one step in the long journey of practicing resurrection. Practicing resurrection will involve legislative acts scrutinizing lending practices, forming new relationships and broad coalitions, advocating for income inequality and reparations, lobbying politicians to fully fund public schools and transportation, and pressuring corporations to invest in communities that have long been ignored. Practicing resurrection, these words remind me, is ensuring the vision of the world present on Palm Sunday didn't die on Good Friday. It's living as if the world we long for is possible. The moral arc of the universe bends towards justice if we make it so, and the stone has got to be rolled back from the tomb again and again every year. Roll up your sleeves, says Victoria Weinstein, because if by some miracle, and why not a miracle, Jesus did come back, wouldn't he want to see us like this? Wouldn't it be a miracle to live for just one day so that if he did, by some amazing feat, come riding into town, he could look around and say, this is what I meant. And we could say, it took us a long time, but we finally figured it out. Oh, let us live to make it so. Alleluia and amen. Please rise in body or spirit for our hymn, number 344, A Promise Rings Through the Ages. You may be seated for our closing words, inspired by Alex Holt. For all those who celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, may this day be another affirmation of divine love and promise. For all those who celebrate Passover, may this festival of freedom remind you of the courage of ancestors and the promise of liberation. For all those who see the eternal story of new spring and life beginning anew, may you breathe deeply of a season of hope. For all who are experiencing despair, May you find in the darkness or depression a doorway to light and warmth that offers you freedom. And for all of us, together we can do what no one isolated person can do. Rolling the heavy stone aside together reminds us we are far more powerful than we ever could be on our own. Our offering of strong hands to help and loving hearts to heal, our prayers made real. Let us begin again in love. May you feel your aliveness today. Go forth and practice resurrection. We join together in the words for the extinguishing of the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Please rise in body or spirit, and with our hands over our hearts or holding a hand of those next to us, we sing words of blessing one to another. Go in peace, blessed be.